The US says ISIS sold $500 million of oil, with a great deal going to Syrian government. ISIS brings in about $40 million a month in revenue from oil sales, according to remarks made by Acting Treasury Undersecretary Adam Sousbin in London on the same day the US military announced it had killed ISIS's finance minister in an airstrike in Iraq late last month. According to Adam Sousbin, ISIS has earned $500 million from oil sales so far, as well as between $500 million and $1 billion from Iraqi and Syrian bank lootings, while it, quote, extorted many millions more from the populations under its control. ISIS presents a challenging financial target, Sousbin said in the prepared remarks. Unlike many other terrorist groups, ISIL derives a relatively small share of its funding from donors abroad. Rather, ISIL generates wealth from economic activity within the territory it controls. This makes it difficult to constrain its funding. Nevertheless, Sousbin said the US was working with Iraq to cut off banks in ISIS-controlled territory from the international financial network, and that it had sanctioned more than 30 ISIS leaders and financiers. The US-led military coalition had also begun, he said, to bomb ISIS key energy assets, including oil fields, refineries and tankers. Sousbin reportedly deviated from his prepared remarks, telling his audience in London that ISIS had been selling a great deal of oil to the Assad regime, far more than had made its way into Turkey or Kurdish-controlled areas there and in Iraq. Russia has previously accused Turkey of being the primary destination of oil from ISIS, alleging Turkish President Recep Erdogan and his son-in-law, Berat al-Bayrak, the new energy minister and former CEO of an Istanbul-based conglomerate, were orchestrating the resale of oil coming from ISIS, an allegation Erdogan called a slander. Earlier this week, at a Senate hearing, Defense Secretary Ashton Carter opened the door to redeploying troops to Iraq, but also warned such an escalation would Americanize the conflict and fuel a call to jihad in the region. In an address to the nation from the Oval Office on Sunday, President Barack Obama described ISIS as part of a terrorist threat that, quote, evolved into a new phase after the US limited the ability of terrorist groups to perpetrate complex, multifaceted attacks like 9/11, saying the US and its allies were ramping up their military campaign against ISIS and its infrastructure in the wake of the November 13 ISIS attacks in Paris. The United States continues to insist the political solution to the war in Syria will require Bashar Assad, a Russian ally, to step down. Critics of the Syrian regime accuse it of avoiding a confrontation with ISIS and even creating space for it in order to weaken the broader rebel movement, part of which the US supports. Meanwhile, Russian airstrikes against Syrian rebels, ISIS and other terrorist groups, how much attention is paid to each depends on who you ask, continue, with Turkey accusing the country of perpetrating an ethnic cleansing.